Hottie, I've got an admission to make. I have kind of a chicken and egg problem with CBD, or at least I used to, back before we brought Floyd's of Leadville into the show as a sponsor.
Oh, great. This is the second week in a row then we've had some type of confession. All right, so what is yours?
Well, the fact is I'm pretty skeptical about supplements and medicines in general. If I had never talked to Floyd and Dave Z about them, I honestly don't know if I would have ever even tried them out. The thing is, at least the way I am, you don't know if they're worth using if you've never used them, but you're not willing to spend money on them to find out if they're worth using.
Right. I'm not too different than you, Fatty. I bring a critical eye to almost everything. So I wasn't exactly sold on CBD until we had given it a try. Now, it did help, too, that, two people we know, Floyd and Dave Zabriskie, were behind this product. They've come from the cycling community, so that helped a lot. Now, of course, I'd say we're both sold on the merits of Floyd's of Leadville at this point.
Yeah, for sure we are at this point, but I don't think it's reasonable for us to just assume our listeners are less cautious than we are.
Hey, high-quality CBD products are not cheap, and you want to get good value for your money. And Floyd's of Leadville gets that. So they've put together goodie giveaways. CBD sample sets worth $10 at no charge to you.
Yeah, there's 3 kinds you can choose from, too. Just go to floydsofleadville.com and click the Goodie Giveaways link at the right edge of the page. Then choose the Gems or More pack, or the Soft Gel and Gem Sampler, or the Variety Pack. I personally would choose the Variety Pack.
And you'll get that at no charge to you, letting you try some of Floyd's of Leadville before you buy.
Yeah, and we're pretty sure you're going to be back. And when you are, just use the code FATTY for your purchases at checkout for a 15% discount on all your future orders.
And thanks, Floyd's of Leadville, for sponsoring the show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. It is season 3, episode 22 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Houghton, Hottie to most.
And I'm Eldon Nelson, and I am sad to say that my nickname has been Fatty for close to 2 decades. Hottie, this is an episode both you and I have wanted to do for a long time.
That's right. Only 2 people have done the Leadville 100 every single time it's been raced. And sorry, Fatty, you're not one of them. You're close, but you're not one of them. John Callahan is, of course, one of those 2, and TODD Murray is the other. And we've got a full hour with Todd. There's literally nobody, Fatty, with more experience in this race.
Yeah, I am so excited to share this conversation, Hottie. Quickly, though, before we do, I want to give our listeners a little PSA. Because this episode is going to be coming out right at the beginning of September, which means whatever Airbnbs and Verbos and hotel rooms are going to be available in August of 2021 should now be open for booking.
And this is going to be a year that has rentals filling up faster than ever before. The 2 waves of deferrals from the 2020 year means that a lot of people already know that they're planning to be in Leadville for the race in 2021. If you are one of those people and you expect to stay in Leadville, maybe take care of getting your reservations now.
Yeah, I've actually already taken care of mine, Hottie, or I wouldn't have done this promo. And I'm not sure who I'm promoting. It is an actual PSA. And I think you've taken care of yours as well. One advice piece here for folks who are renting: no matter where you go, no matter who you rent with, no matter where you get a reservation, make sure that where you go has a good cancellation policy. Not verifying that little piece of info really bit me in the butt this year. And the world's an uncertain enough place right now that you probably want to have the option to cancel if you absolutely have to.
Yep, the voice of experience right here. Some of you may have caught the post of me repairing a brake lever. I put it out on, I think, Instagram and Facebook. A brake lever that was not from Shimano, I'm afraid to admit. Yes, I still have some stuff from other brands hanging around. I think I talked about this last week. I hoard stuff. I hold on to things. I try to make them work forever. I'm just trying to get the very last mile out of everything.
Yeah, I saw that post on Facebook, and I'm proud to say that I refrained from typing one word, Shimano. I think you shed a little light on this last episode by telling us that, about your hoarding problem. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, true. I just won't give up on stuff, no matter how bad it looks. In the case of this brake lever, it has been sticky for most of its life, so I thought I would just pull the thing apart. What you didn't see in the photos was the isopropyl alcohol, the gloves, and protective eyewear I needed to pull off this job. The lever I was working on uses what's called DOT fluid. That actually stands for Department of Transportation. In other words, the fluid is regulated. And that stuff, though, even though it's regulated, is corrosive. So you got to protect your skin, your eyes, and your bike paint when you're using it.
Yikes, I am not going to touch that. And I have noticed a lot of mechanics wearing gloves when working on brakes. That must be why.
Yeah, it is one of the reasons why. Shimano, though, does not use DOT fluid in their brakes. They use mineral oil. In fact, they use mineral oil that they make themselves. And mineral oil does have a couple of advantages. It's nowhere near as toxic as DOT fluid, and it does not absorb water. It's an oil, so obviously water's going to stay out of it. This means a couple of things. Shimano brakes have fewer issues for your skin and your bike's paint. And in general, a bleed will last longer with mineral oil. You'll find a lot of Shimano owners saying this, yeah, bled them once and never had to do it again. They may have performed a routine bleed here and there, but the lever was never at a point where they felt like they needed to bleed it. That's mostly thanks to mineral oil and the fact that Shimano makes terrific brakes. The other thing you did not see in my photo were the 3 bottles of DOT fluid that were about a quarter full each, because DOT, like I said, can absorb water, which reduces its boiling point, and DOT fluid must remain sealed to keep the water out. So once you break the seal in one of these small bottles, if you don't use it all, chances are you're going to have these little bottles hanging around everywhere. Mineral oil has a much longer shelf life. So if you like to work on your own stuff, make it easier and cleaner on yourself by grabbing some Shimano brakes with mineral oil.
And if you don't like working on your own stuff, then buy Shimano, because then you have to work on stuff a lot less. That's what I do. You can check out all of Shimano's performance-enhancing components at bike.shimano.com. So, Hadi, we're going to get to the TODD Murray interview in just a sec, I swear. But first, I have a pressing question for you. Do you always wear bib shorts when riding, or just when you are riding on the road or in a race?
I would say if the ride calls for a chamois, whatever that ride is, then yes, it's bibs. They just hold the shorts up and in place much better. How about you?
It depends on the ride and the weather and the intensity. But saying if I'm on the road, or if I'm riding alone, or it's hot outside, or it's a long day in the saddle, DNA bibs for sure, and close-fitting DNA jersey. But for rides where you're stop and go, or having fun, or the weather's getting cooler, I found I've really come to like the DNA free ride baggies, which I wear over a pair of DNA bibs. So I guess you could say that, yes, I always wear DNA bibs, but not just DNA bibs. I really like the free ride shorts. They are perfect. They look great on a mountain bike ride. They're a little loose, but not so baggy. The crotch hangs up on the nose of my saddle. I don't know if you've ever had that problem. It is not fun, but I've been combining these free ride shorts with the DNA free ride jersey. And it's the same quality of the technical fabric you expect from DNA, but it's a little bit of a looser fit. It's a pullover with a 3/4 sleeve, no zipper, and it's just a little bit less nerdy than riding in a tight jersey on days when you're just out mountain biking for fun.
Yeah, in a future episode, Fatty, you and I will have a breakdown discussion on why baggies make a lot of sense, and they do, I think, in a number of occasions, and we'll say that for another episode. You can find both the free ride gear and nerdier cycling clothes over at dnacycling.com.
Yeah, premium quality, affordable prices, award-winning designs from the USA with products made in Italy. Honestly, you just can't beat dnacycling.com.
Fatty, back in 1994, 150 people gathered at 6th and Harrison for the first ever Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike race. TODD MURRAY was one of them, and he's been back for the race every single time.
Yeah, and it's not like he's just barely crossed the finish line each of those times either. Well, except for one time. And we're going to hear about that. He is a fast guy. He is a smart guy. And I got to say, Hottie, he has so many good stories to tell.
It was definitely a privilege to interview one of only two people who has raced every single Leadville 100, TODD MURRAY. All right, Fatty, TODD MURRAY is with us, joining us on the phone from Colorado, home of our favorite race, the Leadville Trail 100. Now, Todd, I want to start with some fun stuff here. First of all, when researching you, all you got to do is put in TODD MURRAY, Leadville, and a lot of cool, actually, pictures come up. And one of them is the picture of the start of the first Leadville Trail 100. It's taken from the top of 6th Street, looking back at Harrison, with the riders coming towards the camera. Now, Todd, can you pick yourself out in that very distant picture of the starters?
Yeah, that's a great picture, isn't it? I've looked at that many times, and no, I can't tell you who I was in that group. Very small group. I think they had like 114 finishers that year, something close to that. I was definitely in the back somewhere of that group just because I didn't know what the heck I was getting into, and I was kind of being cautious. But I could not tell you where I am, which actual person in that group I was.
Well, I guess when you race the Leadville Trail 100 as many times as you have, which is all of them, by the way, folks, some years can blend into another. So remembering every point along the way, where you were on the course or where you were in every photo, can be a little tough. Now, another picture for you, Todd, that I found was you finishing in a time of 8 hours and 10 minutes and doing a wheelie across the finish line. Now, Todd, do you always wheelie at the finish?
Never say never or always, right? It's definitely something I enjoy doing. As a kid, I learned how to do that, and as an adult, I just kept doing it. And the red carpet at Leadville is certainly a fun place to do that. However, I don't always do that, and for different reasons. Sometimes finishing Leadville, I've been too exhausted to do it, and I would end up on my back on the red carpet with everyone laughing if I tried to do it on certain years. But more recently, last year when I finished with my daughter, no wheelie, and the year prior got to finish with John Callahan, the other guy who's done every single race, and no wheelie at that race either. But typically, yeah, I try to do the wheelie at the end. It's kind of just a fun way to end the day.
Yeah, good call to not do the wheelie when you're rolling across with John Callahan. That's a cool enough moment. You don't really need to showboat it, right? But doing things like that, ritual is an incredibly important part of this race. At least it is for me. The red carpet, seeing certain people out at certain places, all of that is just a big part of what makes this race something that we love. What are the rituals or the traditions that you do have that you try to observe? Like you say, never say always, never say never, but that you try to have every year.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So I would say the first thing that comes to mind is typically Friday before the race every year, we make a habit of riding out to the bottom of St. Kevin's, the way the race course goes out, and then we ride back up the boulevard, the way the race course comes back. And we'll do that every year for a couple of reasons. One, just to do our little spin out ride the day before the race. But two, just to get an idea of, first of all, seeing if there's a big mud puddle down, I think they call it Leadville Junction, right after you get over the railroad tracks and we hit the dirt for the first time. There have been years where that intersection is just a huge mud puddle. So the next morning, oh boy, we're going to have 1,800 people rolling down this road pretty darn fast, and everyone's going to try to squeeze off to one side or the other of this mud puddle. So it gives us an opportunity to see if the puddle's there. Then coming back, it gives us an opportunity to see what the boulevard looks like, because that's always a question mark too. You're late in the race, you're about to finish, and you've got that last left turn up the boulevard to attack or to survive. And some years it's really, really bad, and some years it's not so bad. But it gives you an idea, again, just to see what the conditions are like. I don't know what that is. Maybe the first 3 or 4 or 5 miles, and maybe the last 5 miles.
Yeah, it's not a big distance, but that sounds very familiar, very similar to the Friday or Thursday before the race loop that I do. And I especially like that because seeing that corner from the gutter onto the boulevard is really important, because rain or what have you can change what line is going to work, what's rideable versus what is get off your bike and hike a bike for 50 feet, 100, almost exactly the 100-mile mark of that course, when you really don't want to get off your bike and have to push it yet one more time. So yeah.
Right. And that's great. You mentioned it is the 100-mile mark, Eldon, because I was with someone one year where we made that left turn, and I don't know who the guy was, but he said, "Hey, where's the finish? I'm at 100 miles." And I said, "Well, we got about 20 minutes to go because it's up the boulevard." And he didn't realize it was his first time doing Leadville, and he thought it was a 100-mile bike race.
Right.
And maybe in the early days it was much closer to 100 miles, but I think it's closer to like 103 and a half, something like that.
Right.
Yeah, and so he was, you could tell, devastated when we started up the boulevard, and I said, we got about 20 more minutes to go. And he just fell apart and really slowed down at that point. I think he was really anticipating, give it everything I got for 100 miles and I'm done. Well, he was done. I never saw him again, but it's good to kind of know you got to go up the boulevard here, and it takes a while to get into town. So,
Todd, let's really turn back time here and take you back to the first Leadville Trail 100, or even before that. Tell me what your riding was like before you ever got involved in the Trail 100, and then how did you get into it?
Yeah, great question. So I think I did in 1994. I was 30 years old, thinking, great, I could easily do a 100-mile mountain bike race, because I had done some much shorter mountain bike races. But I'd also done some road stuff as far as centuries, 100-mile centuries. I'd done the Davis double century a couple of times out in California. So a very confident, maybe overconfident 30-year-old on a bike. And back then I had a buddy named Jim Butera who had been involved with the run as well, the 100-mile run, and was involved in the 100-mile bike in the early stages of the race, who tipped me off to, hey, they're going to do this race in Leadville. Are you interested in driving out? We both lived in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. So Jim was my point of contact. He was the one that turned me on to the whole thing. And I thought, sure, sounds great. Let's go out to Colorado and try this thing. And so, yeah, he was the one that got me into it. Obviously, after doing it the first time and getting my butt kicked, by the way, I was hooked. But what a lot of people don't know about that first year, and I don't think I'm wrong on this, you probably can't find it in any documentation, but I'm almost positive Ken stood up there before the race. They had no idea what the time limits would be. So before the race, I'm almost positive he threw it out there saying, okay, everybody, tomorrow, if you go under 8 hours, you get the big buckle. And if you go under 11 hours, you get the smaller one. Well, the next day, only the winner went under 8 hours. John Stamstead won the thing. I think he won it in 7:58. And so Ken adjusted his times at the award ceremony by saying, okay, we're going to do 9 and 12 instead of 8 and 11. But even with that 8-hour limit, prior to the race, I went into that race thinking, oh, I'm leaving here with the big buckle. It didn't happen. I got my butt kicked, but I was hooked. And I came back the next year and said, I'm definitely going to big buckle the next year, which luckily I did. But it's just kind of a neat, like unknown trivia. that I'm pretty sure Ken in the beginning said 8 and 11, and then it got adjusted after everyone finished to 9 and 12.
How many big buckles do you have?
Good question, Eldon.
I love the humility that you don't know. I could answer that question instantly.
Well, I'm trying to think of the years that I didn't big buckle was for sure the first year. And then I rode with my dad one year where I did an 11:55 and got a small buckle, but not a big buckle. And that was okay. I rode with two other buddies one year where we did a 10:06, and that was okay. We had planned to ride together, and whatever the time was, it was. And then I rode last year with my daughter, and we did like 10:19, and that was fine too. So I think out of the 26, I have 22 big buckles.
Extraordinary.
What was your slowest time and what was your fastest time? And let's just look at your individual times and not the times when you were trying to help other people. So your slowest personal that is time, and your fastest time, and the difference. What was the difference maker, you think?
Yeah, so I'll say it's getting harder. I'm 57 now, but in the past, I know that when I put in the work, I can typically go up there and go under 9 hours. And so my very fastest was in 1997. I did an 8:09. And it must have been a fast year because that was also the year that Lori Brandt went under 8 hours. I thought that was like a landmark year for the race. Lori Brandt finishes 7th overall in the race and does a 7:58. And that happened to be the year I PR'd too with my 8:09. I'm pretty sure it was 8:09. But like we were talking, I think the race course was much closer to 100 miles back then. And Eldon, maybe you know, because you were definitely at some of the very, very early races, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done 23 times.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was like 22, 23. And so I know you had to be there at some of those early races where, and again, it's before GPS. So everybody's going off of their bike computer where it's measuring the wheel rolling. But I thought we were a lot closer to 100 miles. Now we're a lot closer to 103 and a half. And so more recently, in 2013, I actually did an 8:10. And I think that was probably a better performance than the 97 one because the course is a little longer in 2013, it's more like today's course. But to be only a minute off of my PR and to be older doing it, I think that was maybe my best effort. But on those years where, like you're describing, Hadi, that I'm not riding with someone, because that 11:55 year was my slowest ever, but not like you're saying. It's different than riding by myself. Every other year's been under the 9 hour mark. So I think 8:55 was my slowest personal, but I'm still trying really hard. And the 8:09 was my best. That
8:10 time is in particular notable because you probably have more traffic, I would think, to deal with. By the time you get to 2013, the race has really grown. You're dealing with more people on the climbs by then. Is that the case for you, or are you a front of race guy? Where do we find you in the race? Where do we find Todd Murray usually in the race?
Right. Yeah. No, you hit on a great point. Certainly. More present day, it's a lot more crowded. After, I think it was 2008, Lance showed up. The face of the race definitely changed. We went from, it was getting bigger on its own, but Lance really brought it to the forefront of mountain bikers and other bikers' attention. And so the field limit seemed like it really did go up. And yes, it definitely is a factor where now you don't have to be out there at 5 a.m. to get your spot on the start line because now you're in a corral somewhere. And although people will still go out there 5 a.m. to try to get at the front of their corral, I'm typically in the third corral back, the red corral. And it seems like I'm in the right place as far as speed-wise because the guys in the gold and silver in front of me, they take off and they're gone. The guys in the red corral and then maybe some of the corrals behind me, the fasties that are, slower corral. They're coming through me, but I don't have to deal with that congestion, I guess, as much as what maybe you're alluding to. Although every year going up Columbine, the leaders seem to be coming down at a lower point than I remember from the year prior, and that does affect you, because then you're forced to stay over to the right no matter what. Whereas when there's, in the early years, fewer people, you could zigzag your way up Columbine a little more easily because there were fewer people coming down.
The fast guys are definitely getting faster. I would think there's also an argument to be made that while the number of racers has greatly increased, the bandwidth of the course has also increased. You, of course, will remember from the first few years, I can't remember when it changed, but instead of cutting off of the Maqueen pavement onto the Hagerman's dirt road, both of which are very wide, there was a very brief section of single track that connected those two. And the bottleneck for that was extraordinary. I don't know where you were in that line, but I, at least in that line, had to get off my bike before I ever touched the dirt. And it was simply a march the entire way up. Just, one person following the next, walking the entire way up. Were you able to ride on that? And I mean, tell us about, so that's part one of the question. Other question is, what other course changes do you remember? And, how's the race, the feel of the race changed?
Yeah, I definitely remember the single track you're talking about, because we actually got onto the Colorado Trail for a brief little moment before we dumped onto Hagerman Pass Road. And that little piece of Colorado Trail we would ride on is actually a part of the run course as well. So I know it from both of those events. But for the most part, I was lucky enough to get there where I could ride into that area, into that little single track. But then it was the fate of whoever was in front of you. If somebody walked, everyone was walking behind them. It was so tight in there that if that momentum stopped within that area, nobody was riding it, because, it instantly came to a stop. So that was definitely something that they had to take out when the numbers went up, and like you're describing, the congestion got too much. That also happened to be the area on the way back, the year I rode with my dad, that it was 1996, I had just descended that area and dumped back onto the paved road, and there happened to be a volunteer standing there. And I said, hey, how much longer does it take to get to the finish from here? I really didn't know. And he said, I just stopped telling people that they could make it. And my dad hadn't caught up with me yet. And I said, hey, my dad and I had talked about it all day long. I might have to leave him to finish in under 12 hours. I still wanted to be an official buckler that year. So I said, hey, my dad's right behind me. He'll be here shortly. Can you tell him I had to leave? And he'll understand. And the guy said, sure. But the guy scared me, because he said, hey, I just stopped telling people they could make it. Well, it was about an hour left in the race. We were at about the 11-hour mark, and I started riding as hard as I could, and riding scared, not knowing if I'm going to make it or not. And I'm passing the back markers at this time, because these are people that had been out all day trying to make it. And I had been riding with my dad, so riding conservatively for me. But the neat thing out of this story is I'm passing people, and as people are stopped for whatever reason, I'm asking them, you okay? You need anything? Everybody's saying they're fine. Yep, just tired. I'm okay. Except for one guy. Come across one guy, and he says, the only way you can help me is if you brought a spare tire. And I had carried a spare tire in case my dad had a problem. I was trying to get him to the finish that day. And I said, buddy, it's your lucky day. So I whip out this spare tire out of this giant fanny pack that I'd been carrying all day, gave it to him. I said, do you need anything else? He said, nope, I'm good. I said, finish. Whatever you do, finish. So I go on my way, and I'm, again, riding scared. I come in at 11:55, not planned at all, but, with less than 5 minutes to spare to get the 12-hour buckle. And it's like 50 minutes later, my dad finishes with a 12:46, he still finishes, and I think he gets the medal for it for being a finisher, but no buckle. Well, the guy that I gave the tire to, he was from Florida. He finished. And so at least he got the finisher's medal, I'm almost positive, and ran into him the following year, and he buckled. So it was kind of a neat, like, well, that's cool. That guy got to at least finish the race. He wasn't a DNF. And then to see him next year actually get the buckle was pretty special. But the other part of your question, so the other changes, the thing I missed most, maybe the other piece that they changed, and you'll remember, Fatty, is the North Face. So North Face used to be a sponsor of the race. We had a hill in between Pipeline and Twin Lakes that was called the North Face. And it was this brutally steep face that we would ride down. They have that single track in there now to go around it. But it was this brutally steep thing that, man, you could get speed going down that thing, and you were hike-a-biking it coming back. But I missed that. I missed that little face. It was a shortcut around all the new single track that dumps you onto that dirt road in between Pipeline and Twin Lakes. And I would say that was the other piece that I kind of wish they still had in the race.
I missed that too. That said, just think how many fewer collarbones St. Vincent's Hospital has had to repair by them changing that.
You're right.
That was widely known as both the North Face, as you're calling it, and as Collarbone Hill. Just so many people endoed coming down that thing, and It was a technical, sketchy thing that was either fun or terrifying, just depending on your mountain biking skill. So I'd love to get you to talk a little bit about some of your other, location-based favorite stories. Like for me, there's when I ride the course anymore, it is just it's a cross between what I'm experiencing in the moment and memories from 20 plus times of doing this thing. In particular, Columbine. The iconic 8 miles of this course. What do you most think about from that climb or that descent?
Wow. Yeah. When you say that, the first thing that comes to mind is the descent, because I've seen some pretty beat up people on my way down that were ahead of me that crashed. And so, that's the last thing you want to see is somebody with whatever, injuries, broken whatever, side of the road being attended to by medical. That's the first thing that comes to mind, because people, I think a lot of people might try to get time back there. It's free speed if you can let it rip. But at the same time, the risk to reward ratio, for me, I'm not a descender, and I've crunched the numbers enough to know that, okay, the really, really fast guys are going to come down in whatever it is, 20 minutes. And the really, really slow guys might be 30 minutes, and I'm in between there somewhere. So the number of minutes gained isn't worth the risk to me, but I have seen some pretty beat up people coming down that, and only to hear later, maybe at the next day at the award ceremony, oh yeah, that crash on Columbine, the guy broke his collarbone, or he got a concussion, or whatever. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Over 100 miles, yeah, there are many, many places on the course that over the years they do blur together. I'm trying to think of other places.
Is there a favorite place on the course?
Oh, I have a favorite. Yeah, absolutely. That red carpet at the end, that's my favorite 15 yards of the course. I'm trying to think, Eldon, if there's something else. It used to be the fish hatchery. Do you remember back in the day where we had the aid station there?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we all had to beware because, of course, this is pre-chip, right? And so one of my most standout memories is there were a few volunteers furiously writing race numbers down for our splits. And I remember always looking at them going, because I was usually middle of the pack, right? A 10-hour finisher back in those days. And and so there were a lot of people surrounding me as I'm going through, and I'm looking at those volunteers just scribbling as fast as they can. I also, right before the fish hatchery, there is a really cool house, and there was a guy with an electronic horn that he would beep as racers went by. And at some point he stopped being there. I always wondered, hoping that he's happy and okay. But, that was always something that I look forward to. It's funny what things kind of draw you and really stick in your memory.
Right. No, I agree. I remember the guy with the horn. I think he was kind of at the top of the hill there before you drop down into the fish hatchery. And you've already descended off of Power Line and crossed that little creek. That little creek, I have a lot of memories from that little creek, because that was another thing. Every year I'd wonder if, did someone put a board there again? Are we going to have to ride through the water? Or at the narrow part of the creek, if there's no board, do you get off your bike and jump over the creek? Because you're only 20-something miles into the race, and the last thing I wanted to do was ride through that creek, wash off all my chain lube, and then go the next 80 miles with a squeaky, chain that's attracting dust. So I'd always try to be careful not to get too wet there at that creek crossing.
Did you ever ride through, or have you always, back when there was this creek, and sometimes it could be pretty deep, I have seen people go down in that. Did you ever ride through, or did you always do the sort of tiptoe around route?
Yeah, I think I rode through one time and then realized there were the people going around it, and that's the way I should have gone. So the next year I definitely, and every other year I would go around it. Now we don't have to worry about that with the road, and they must have put him in a conduit under the road. But yeah, definitely in the early years that creek was a concern. One of the other things that comes to mind is on the boulevard finishing. And on the boulevard, if I'm not mistaken, as we come up, there's 2 times we actually cross old railroad tracks. And one of my favorite stories, I think you wrote a story way, way back about training really hard and doing a 906. And then you talk about, but in the race, you got stuck by a train on the boulevard for 6 minutes.
I wish I could claim that, but that was actually Mike Ferrantino, who wrote that for Bike Magazine. Yeah, and that was something that Ken talked about. I wish I could claim that. That's a good story.
I think of that every time I'm going up the boulevard and crossing those tracks, which I don't believe they use anymore. It looks like, no, they're not using these. They're covered in dirt. Trains can't go over this anymore. But I think about that every time, going up there thinking, oh my gosh, how devastating would that be to get stuck by a train right here.
Yeah, it's agreed. Great story, and I wish that I had been that fast that I could have claimed that as a good reason, as opposed to the many, many excuses that I've had for being slower than sub 9. But love that. So power line, that is, both coming down and going up. I want to hear your thoughts on, what is in your head is in the morning as you're coming down power line, and then, of course, late in the day as you were confronting that beast of a climb coming up.
Sure. Yeah. And you've ridden it enough to know, too. I think last year was by far the smoothest I have ever seen it or remember seeing it, which is awesome, but also super, super scary because you can go so fast on that thing. And I'm typically not worried about my speed, but I've definitely been on power line in the morning, coming down in the race, being passed by people that are just, almost out of control. And again, I'm thinking, this is not where you can win the race, but this is where you can lose it. And they talk about that in the pre-race meeting every year. And it seems like every year, maybe the one guy who didn't go to the meeting and listen is the guy flying down and crashes or whatever. But this past year was amazingly smooth. Again, awesome, because okay, now I'm not going to be darting from one side of the trail to the other to stay out of the giant ruts. But even on those giant rut years, my biggest fear are the people that are flying down past me. They're much better descenders. To me, they appear to be slightly out of control, and only to gain, a few seconds, maybe a minute, because I'm almost positive I end up linking back up with those guys on the pavement once we come out of the bottom. So the fear in the morning of these downhill kamikaze guys is always going through my head every single race. Coming back like you're describing, it is pretty daunting to look up at that and to know, you still have close to 25 miles to go in the race, and you're starting at the last 25 with this huge climb that more than likely is going to be a hike-a-bike. The best guys can ride up it. I am typically I'm going to walk this part of it. Once you get up the face of it, I try not to walk any more of it, but there's some years I just can't help it, But yeah, that it's so mentally tough. You're physically tired. If 80 miles into a race, you don't want to get off your bike and walk, and you're looking at the clock, and you want to ride your bike. It's a mountain bike race. But once you get over that, once you get past that, and if you can get past depending on how you count, how many false summits are on that thing, 3, 4, 5, or 6, then you're good to go, because the next piece after that, including the descent off of Sugarloaf, it's all rideable. But boy, is that a huge mental hurdle to get over, to try to get up and over power line at the end of the race.
More great stories coming up with Todd Murray in just a second. But first, I want to tell you, Fatty, Mrs. Hottie and I are doing the RPI Challenge ride this weekend. She's been training really hard for the 56-miler. Now, the challenge we've accepted is to replicate, as best as possible, the second to longest version of the Rebecca's RPI ride that's usually held on Labor Day weekend. Of course, we're not in Idaho this year, so we are all doing our rides on our home courses.
Yeah, Lisa and I are also doing the RPI challenge. We are doing the Queen Stage version, which is 3 days. Half of it has to be on dirt, and there's a certain amount of distance and climbing that you've got to do for each of them. It's looking like it is going to be a very challenging couple of days. And if you haven't signed up, I will tell our listeners, and you're hearing this before Labor Day weekend, you can still get in.
I'm still finalizing some details for our French fry ride, but 2 things I know for sure. The host, Rebecca Rush, and I will both be on Envy wheels. Whether I ride my steel rigid mountain bike or my steel rigid gravel bike, I will have Envy wheels rolling under me. M50s on the mountain bike and G23 gravel wheels on the drop bar bike. Steel may be real, Fatty, but Envy is the real deal when it comes to carbon wheels.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rebecca Rush is an Envy athlete, so she too will be on Envy. Her go-to gravel wheels are also the G23s, which, by the way, is the lightest wheel in the Envy lineup.
Light due to the 24-spoke count front and rear and that hookless bead. My new gravel bike is more of a rondo bike, rondoneering bike, and it's built to carry big loads, which is to say this bike is overbuilt for normal riding. In fact, I haven't even weighed the thing yet because I'm just too afraid to find out what this massive number would be. So having a set of wheels that weighs just over 1,300 grams really does help in my case.
Oh, yeah. That rotating weight matters. It really does. And you can check out the G23 wheel set and all of the Envy bars, stems, wheels, seat posts, everything that they do over at Envy. That is ENVE.com. Hottie, let's get back to Todd Murray. He and John Callahan are the only 2 people to make the start line in every single one of the Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike races.
Some folks might be wondering, do you and John get any type of special treatment for the race? Do they do anything for you to help you get in, give you a corral position, or are you with the rest of us here trying to elbow our way into the Leadville Trail 100?
Yeah, so I think we fall into the category of not necessarily special because we've done every one, but if I'm not mistaken, there has to be a magic number out there where if you've done, I think it's around 7 or 8 Leadvilles. I think you're in when you put your name in for the lottery. I think they grant you, okay, look, we're going to allow this person to get in the race, which makes a lot of sense to me. If you're at number, let's say 7, you've done 7, and you're going for that 1,000-mile buckle. Well, obviously you got to get number 8 to get the 1,000. I don't think they're going to ding you by saying you're in the lottery like everyone else, and if you don't get your 8 this year, you can try again next year. So I don't know what that magic number is. I've never actually been told, but I think Eldon, me, John, anyone who's done, again, maybe 7 or 8, I think we're in when we throw our name into the lottery. The only time I've ever had like a little bit of special attention treatment was at year 20 when John and myself and Ricky McDonald, we were all going for our 20th finish in a row, and they called us up. We actually started on the front line in the front of the Gold Corral with all the pros, which felt really, really awkward, because we are not at that speed. None of us were. And so as soon as the gun went off, they're riding away from us and we're going backwards through all these people. But that's the only time I've got that little bit of extra, we're going to let you do this, because they called us up. It was a big deal for the 20th year. Other than that, whatever corral I fall into, it's either, based on the last year's finish, or if I go to a qualifier. I've done that before, where I've gone to a qualifier to try to improve my corral position.
Yeah, I've seen you down at Austin Rattler before, that's for sure. And you're down there with your daughter, in fact, qualifying, which was very cool. Was there ever a year where it was close, like you may not make the race at all because of work or life or some other issue?
Yeah, life does kind of get in the way, right? Sometimes. I would say no, not really. It definitely had to juggle some things around, and then sometimes things come up that you just can't move.
Well, in 2011, you did break your foot, but somehow you did the Leadman?
Yeah, that was probably not the smartest thing either that I've done, but correct. You're right. That was a tough year. A month before Leadman started, and it starts with the Leadville Marathon. You have to finish the marathon. But a month before the marathon, I was out dirt biking on my motorcycle, and I hit a big old rock with my boots and ended up fracturing three bones in my foot. And so that was a tough year because, sure, the ER doc that I talked to, I said, hey, I got this marathon in about a month. When can I start running on this thing? And he's like, I'm sure he's thinking, you're nuts. But he said, just let pain be your guide. And that's probably the wrong thing to say to people like us, because we tend to, block that pain a little bit. Okay, I can do something. It doesn't hurt that bad. But yeah, when I broke the bones, the next day I was in my basement on my trainer. I had cut open a road shoe because my foot was so swollen, cut all the topping off of the road shoe and left one strap to go across. And I was spinning on my bike in the basement thinking, hey, I gotta keep doing stuff for Leadman. It's coming up in a month. I gotta be ready. But that was kind of a hurdle that, I didn't expect that one.
You are such a hard man. I'm just going to come out and say it. Having witnessed, my wife as she did the Lead Woman in the best shape and with no injuries of her life, for you to have done that thing, working on what must have still been a somewhat injured foot, that's extraordinary.
Well, thanks. It you know what? I mean, I don't know. I when you commit to it and it's in your mind, hey, I got to do this thing, then it's a little easier to do it, I think. But yeah, I was really, really psyched on trying to do that whole Leadman thing, and with the underlying goal too of trying to big buckle at both of the bike and the run events and just see how that would go. But I had some friends that had done Leadman in the past, and they're like, oh yeah, you should do this. And it's like, originally I thought, no way. I ran the run in 1999 and thought, I will never do that stupid run again. That was the dumbest thing I ever did. But there was no Leadman in 1999. Leadville did a really good job of promoting this 5-event series and, be a Leadman. And it kind of sunk in. And so by 2011, I think that might have been the 5th or 6th year that they were running Leadman, and I thought, what a great idea. I need to do Leadman. And so, again, the never and always is going to come up again, because I won't say I'll never do that again, but I don't plan on doing it again. And I foresee the only way I'd ever go back and do that again is maybe if one of my daughters said, "Hey, Dad, let's do Leadman." I'd be up for doing that then.
Fatty, we've known Todd here for 35 minutes, and I think we already know the answer to that. He'll be doing it again. He's just going to do it. That's just what's going to happen. Sorry, Todd, you're in a Leadman somewhere down the future, so we'll see you at the start line in some unknown year of this century. Let me ask you some equipment questions, because we love gear on the show too. So tell us your first Leadville Trail 100 bike, your current Leadville Trail 100 bike, and anything you want to say about equipment in general that you've learned over the years.
Okay, first one I still own. It's a commuter now, but it's a hardtail Cannondale mountain bike, 26-inch wheel. I don't know what it is. It's hanging in my garage. It's a commuter. Current day one is probably a 4 or 5 year old Specialized stump jumper hardtail 29er, not S-Works. Love it. The course is definitely one that you can ride either the hardtail on or the full suspension. You know, it gets a lot of attention every year, what bike to ride, what tires to ride, what tire pressures. I will say this, for Leadman, if I were recommending to someone, hey, you're going to do Leadman, I would ride it on a full suspension. The full suspension beats you up a little bit less, I believe, and sets you up a little bit better for that next weekend when you have to go run 100 miles. That being said, I prefer to ride on the hardtail. I'm comfortable on it. I'm not a crazy descender. I don't need all that suspension. I even like locking out that front shock every now and then, on some of the paved sections and whatnot. But if it's your first Leadville, I'd say, man, you can't go wrong on a full suspension. If you're a little more comfortable on your bike, ride the hardtail. And then as far as the wheel size, I think we're seeing more and more of the 27.5s to 29s, a lot less 26. But if you're on a budget, a 26er, my PR was on a 26-inch wheeled mountain bike hardtail. So who knows? If you got the budget, sure, buy the better stuff. If you don't, you can do it on just about any bike.
I think we overthink equipment a little too much. I mean, personally, Todd, one year I cracked a frame at Leadville 5 days out before the race. I had a bike sent to me overnight from my shop here in Los Angeles. Rode that bike. I'd never seen it before and did my best time on it. So you can overthink the gear a little bit. As long as you've got a solid bike underneath you that's not dragging you down, that's not causing you issues out on the course, whoever you are, and that's going to shine through over the course of 103 miles. And I think that's what you've proven over the number of years that you've done the Leadville Trail 100. Anything else there regarding equipment, clothing, food? How has that evolved for you over the years?
Wow. Yeah. So I'm of the mindset, like, I don't want to DNF, and so I carry stuff with me, and I know how to use most of my stuff. I'm hoping if I encounter a problem on the course, I can fix it. I can overcome it. One year I broke a rear derailleur cable coming down power line. So I was on a triple. It's probably a 26er, but on a triple crank set, 3 by whatever in the back, 9 or 8, and break a rear derailleur. Well, when you break a rear derailleur, typically the derailleur is going to default down to your hardest, smallest gear on the back. Well, it was still a 3-speed, and I'm thinking, okay, no problem. I'm on this 3-speed now at the bottom of a power line. I'm going to ride over to Pipeline. It's only a few miles. I'll get a rear derailleur cable from someone, and I'll fix this. My crew was at Twin Lakes. Well, rode over to Pipeline, and as I'm riding through the very long aid station with my hand up, asking, anybody have a rear derailleur cable? Nobody had a rear derailleur cable. So there again, it's like, well, it's still a 3-speed, and my crew is only another, whatever it is, 10 miles down the road. I'm going to ride over to Twin Lakes on this 3-speed where I know my crew is, I know my toolbox there, I know I've got a rear derailleur cable extra in the toolbox. I'll just fix it there, which I did, and fixed it, and the rest of the race was no issues. But I'm always carrying, and I don't carry an extra rear derailleur cable with me now, but it's typically with my crew, and I'll carry what I need to fix on the bike, hopefully to at least get to my crew where maybe they've got an extra, whatever I've given them. For sure, it's an inner tube. There's a pump there. There's CO2. Sometimes my crew has other little things that might break on the bike that I could, replace if I had to. But I'm definitely of the more cautious. Like I'm going to carry, 2 tubes and a patch kit and 2 CO2s because I'm not going to be that guy on the side of the road that already had 1 flat. And now I've got my second flat, but I only carried 1 tube and 1 CO2. And yeah, I may have learned that from one of the early years. And Fatty, you might remember seeing this, but one of the early years, I'd come off of Power Line, riding the pavement over towards the fish hatchery aid station, and I remember seeing a guy running with his bike, and he had a flat tire. I didn't know who it was, and I thought, man, that guy was stupid. Why didn't he carry a tube? And so, I passed him and went on my way. Well, later in the race, he passes me. And after the race, I hear it was Tom Sobel, the famous snowshoer up there in Leadville. And that wasn't his first flat. It was his third flat. He'd already gotten 2 flats. He carried 2 tubes. He fixed those. When he got his third flat, he had to run. Well, he ran to Twin Lakes. Or not to Twin Lakes, to Fish Hatchery, where his crew was. He was able to fix his third flat and finish the race. So I thought, man, with that kind of determination, and he had planned just like I had planned. 2 flats, maybe. I'll carry 2 tubes. I never get a flat on this course. But I still do that. I still make sure I can fix, hopefully, my bike. If I crack the frame, I'm probably out of luck. But for the most part, I try to be prepared.
Yeah, 2 tubes and a plug and enough time and enough CO2 or a pump to inflate up to 3 times. Anymore, it is not that heavy to carry that much. I want to ask you a little bit more about what do you eat during the race and before the race? And you've mentioned crew. I'm sure people would love to know, with the amount of experience you have, what you have evolved to having, where does your crew meet you? Where do they jump ahead? Which ones do you skip?
Yeah, sure. I wish I could tell you I'm a better eater of good food. I have a major sweet tooth. I'm not a vegetarian. I know my diet could be much better. And if it was my profession, I probably would eat better. But I have the occasional Big Mac or Taco Bell or whatever. And but certainly I try to eat well. I'm a believer I love pasta. So, we carbo load the night before the race. They used to have the dinner that we'd go to at the gym, and everyone would go to this pasta dinner, and you'd eat pasta with all the racers and socialize a little bit.
I miss that.
Me too. I know they certainly can't do it now with the corona, but it is something that we've kind of lost along the way. But typically in the race, I drink all my calories. I find it extremely hard to eat and chew and breathe when I'm working so hard. But you have to drink up there. And so I figure, well, if I have to drink, I might as well drink my nutrition as well. So my favorite is a product from the GU people, the Roctane. I happen to really, really like the taste. It agrees with my digestive system, and it works for me. So, very rarely will I have to resort to plan B, which is, okay, if whatever you're using isn't working, take on what the aid stations have. I have done that in the past with some other drink products like Sustained Energy. I think one year I got sick on it and had to dump my bladder out, filled it up with water at the aid station, started taking what they had, their PBJs and their M&Ms and chips, and that got me through the race too. But Yeah, I drink most all my nutrition at Leadville for something of that duration.
Do you have a sense of about how many calories per hour that you are trying to keep on board, and how rigorous are you about, getting a certain amount per per hour, or do you just go by feel?
No, definitely not by feel. And maybe that is a better way to do it. I'm a slave to my beeper on my watch. And so it's set to beep at me every 15 minutes. And every 15 minutes, I'm trying to consume, whether it be a certain amount of gulps out of my Camelback bladder, or I'm trying to do a quarter of my bottle. Because some years I'll race with bottle, some years I'll race with Camelback, some years I'll race with combination of both. But I'm trying to consume about 280 calories an hour. It seems to work for me. And that 280 calories is going to it's going to come in the form, depending on how hot or cold it is, of either maybe a 12 to 16 ounce bottle in the morning when it's really cold and I'm not sweating a whole lot yet, up to maybe 25 or 30 ounces for one bottle in the afternoon when it's really hot, I'm dehydrated. So to play it safe, what I'll typically do, I'll do 16-ounce bottles of my 280 calories, but I'll have an extra water bottle that I'll consume if I need more fluid on top of that.
And where do you place your crew? Where do they meet you?
Yeah, that's become an issue over the years now, too. It's a little harder with I absolutely love Twin Lakes because it's the closest thing I'll ever experience to being in like the Tour de France. When you ride through there, it's mayhem and, crowds yelling, everyone's cheering, but it makes it really, really hard to see your crew. And so in the old days, it used to be, hey, I'll see you at Twin Lakes. I'll see you at it used to be Fish Hatchery. It's now Pipeline. So if I'm lucky enough to have enough family members to say, hey, we're going to have two crews, then it's now evolved to my wife, Lisa, will be at Pipeline. Yeah, she stays at Pipeline all day, catches me going both ways. And then either more family members, or if I'm doing the race with someone, then their family members have been picking a spot, I think they call it Lost Canyon, between the bottom of Columbine and Twin Lakes.
That's the Twin Lakes alternate feed zone. Yeah, we know it well. Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's Hottie's favorite spot. Yeah.
Okay, it tends to be a little less congested or a lot less congested than Twin Lakes itself. And so it's worked out quite well to have someone there, Lost Canyon and Pipeline.
Fantastic. Well, there's a voice of experience, folks. If it's someone who's done it fast and has done it every single time, you couldn't ask for better than that. So you must see, or I'm sure, having done this so many times, and of course you see people going in, both directions, you must see some crazy things. What is the craziest thing you have ever seen at Leadville? And what are tips you have for people that could help some people who are either not finishing at all or not finishing as fast as they'd like to have a more successful race?
Well, great question. So I think the craziest people I see on the course seem to be the tandem folks. They are wild for sure. I mean, they dress crazy. They're super good on those bikes to be able to do what they're doing. They have the look, though, but they also walk the walk because they can ride those bikes. That being said, maybe the craziest person I've ever met up there was one of the early years. I was staying at the Silver King Motel in town. In the hallway, everyone's working on their bikes, and there was some guy from Iowa there, some farmer from Iowa. It was going to be his first bike race, and I'm looking at his bike, and I said, "Well, where's your seat bag? Where's your spare tube?" He's like, "I'm not going to carry one." I said, "Hey, look, you at least have to carry a spare tube. If you get a flat tire, you're going to be out." And he said, "I'm not worried about it." And I gave him a spare tube. We taped it under his seat. I said, "Look, I know you don't have a pump, but if you get a flat, ask. Many people will be riding by you. Hopefully someone will stop and help you pump up your tire." I don't know that he knew even how to change a flat, but at least I was, saying, carry this tube because someone might help you. He didn't finish the race. So that was just a little bit too crazy. So yeah, that being said, fast forward to today. Now, so yeah, you want to go up and you do Leadville. You want to try to do Leadville. I love Dave Weens used to come to the training camps and give advice and say, ride your bike. There's no secret about Leadville. Just ride your bike and ride it a lot. There's a whole lot of truth to that. But that being said, I think you can actually improve your odds by ride your bike a lot and ride the course. Become familiar with the course. So many people don't do that, and I think it's a big slap in the face when they get out there and really realize what they're doing. My daughter expressed that to me last year when we did the race. We'd actually gone up and trained on the course. And she said, Dad, I never knew what you were doing between the aid stations. I knew you were riding your bike, but I had no idea it was this extreme. She would see me ride into the aid station and refuel and ride out. But until she actually got on the course and experienced it for herself in practice, then she got the real appreciation of what we were doing out there. And so for anyone who is maybe looking to go up there and try to do Leadville, even if you haven't gotten in yet, maybe you go up there and crewing is a great way to get kind of into seeing what the race is about, but actually riding on the course, I think, is much better.
All right, Todd. Well, unfortunately, we're not seeing each other this year in 2020, but I wanted to ask you as a final question here, what are you doing in absence of the Leadville Trail 100? Because obviously this has been a big part of your life. And what are your plans for 2021 as it relates to our favorite race here?
Yeah, I certainly hope we can do this in 2021. Hope we get the opportunity to get together. If we do, we pick up from, at least from my end, right where we left off this year. My daughter and I, Lauren, we're planning on doing it again together this year. We did it together last year, and she said, hey, Dad, I want to do it again next year, but I want to try to go faster, which was awesome to hear her say that. It was like wonderful. Now you've got a year under your belt. You know what it's like. You know what it took to get to this point. And then she was eager to come back and try to go faster. So that'll be our plan for next year. We will definitely try to do it together next year. And you're right, this year has been crazy. Every single race that I have signed up for has either been postponed or canceled, except for one. And I'm getting ready to come out to Utah, Fatty, in your state, next Friday. I leave a week from today, actually, to come out next week and do a race called the Utah Mixed Epic, the UME. It's a first-year race. It's a gravel race put on by Tim Tate, a very small field. He had limited it to 50 people. And it's going to be from Salt Lake City down to St. George, Utah, kind of the long way. It's a 856-mile bike race.
Todd, what an honor, what a pleasure it's been talking with you. So much great advice, so many great stories. It's fantastic to hear the voice of experience and obviously the voice of the present in still doing amazing riding out there.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. I love talking with you guys. It's an honor to talk to you guys too. I love what you guys are doing as well. Fatty, you have as much experience up there as I do. I mean, it's just neat to be in the same company as you guys and to talk bike stuff. It's all good.
Hadi, in all of this, one thing I really did not expect was that Todd would be an all-liquid calories racer. I wonder how long he's been using GU-Roctane, how long he's been a devotee to that.
Well, you and I know he's not the only one who's had pretty remarkable success with GU-Roctane. I know Rebecca Rush uses it, and if it works for the Queen of Pain, it probably works for a lot of folks.
Yeah, and our season 2 nutrition columnist, Roxanne Vogel, uses it. I've used it. I like it too. I don't use it exclusively, of course, though you and I both know that the simpler the plan, the better, as long as you can make it work.
And of course, right now is exactly the time to experiment to see if, like Todd, an all-liquid calorie approach to big rides works for you. And as you would expect, GU-Roctane Ultra Endurance is one of many great products at the feed.
Yeah, and they've got multiple flavors of that product as well as multiple ways you can buy. Maybe go and order a few packets right now in a few different flavors. See which ones you like, which ones you don't. Take them all on a big ride, and then for the ones that you do like, whatever works for you, set up a subscribe and save, which helps you knock, a few cents off the cost of every bottle that you buy.
And those savings really add up over time. Plus, our listeners have an additional way to save on every purchase they make at the feed. Just go to thefeed.com/Leadville and sign up for a 15% discount on all your purchases. You've got just under a year to nail down what works for you on big rides.
Yep, better get started. Let's go ahead and wrap up Season 3, Episode 22 of the Leadville Podcast, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. Once again, big thanks to TODD MURRAY for joining us for the show. If you liked this episode, and you better have liked this episode, give us a 5-star rating and a review over at Apple Podcasts. Also, share it with your cycling friends and support our sponsors. They love to hear that you appreciate them making this show possible.
Yeah, one thing we failed to mention about Todd, by the way, folks, is he does have a regular job, like a lot of you racing that race. And that's another reason why his story is so amazing. He is a detective with the Colorado Springs Police Department, full-time job, and finds a way to get it all in. So yeah, again, thanks to Todd for joining us on this show. Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch. That's also where you can find a link to our Slack workspace and jump into our never-ending Leadville conversation.
Yep. You can follow me on Twitter. I am @FatCyclist. You can find Hottie @MichaelHoughton. And you can find us both on Facebook in the Leadville 100 MTB participants group. Everyone, good luck in your training. Thanks so much for listening. And we're going to see you and Todd at the 2021 starting line.
Riders, good luck. We'll see you back here at the finish line underneath that 12-hour cutoff. 20 seconds to go.